Welcome to the bold analysis, ladies and gentlemen. William Ruto was today on 9th October gave his State of the Nation address, and I'm going to do an exclusive analysis on that. But as that was going on, Julius Malema, the South African political activist and renowned public lecturer, was in the country to launch the Pan-African Institute in Mtaani, Makueni County, and gave a public lecture short of what William Ruto is getting wrong. This statement was very intentional and talking about William Ruto Pan-Africanist card. The Pan-Africanist card is something that has been on William Ruto's shoulders for quite some time. And many political pundits were actually torn between seeing Ruto as really Pan-Africanist or just an opportunist. On one side, the president of Kenya appears as a man who is pushing for the African agenda, especially when he is talking in the African soil. But as Julius Malema says, the actions seems not to reflect a man who is pushing the African agenda.
Election and the things he's doing now are two different things. I don't know. Because I heard him saying we need to do away with the dollar and build our own currency. But his actions are not speaking to anything of doing away with the dollar. The latest being putting a red carpet for a murderer, a person who killed the Kenyan people, coming into this country, receiving a red carpet and being saluted by our own army. This is not a Kenyan army, it's not a colonialist army. The Kenyan army is a product of the Mau Mau rebellion, and those who killed our people in the Mau Mau rebellion cannot be saluted by the same army of the children of those who were killed during Mau Mau rebellion. We have a duty to stay true to the cause. We have a duty to remind the king and Britain of what they did to us. Indeed, he shows no remorse. He says this was bad, it shouldn't have happened. But he runs short of, I apologize, I am sorry. He will never say he is sorry, for because he thinks that his race makes him superior and he's not qualified to apologize to those who are junior to him. We call upon the Kenyan government to be firm and to decide what they want to be. Do they want to be Pan-Africanist, or do they want to be proponents of neo-colonialism? You can't have it both. Only one call must be made, and that call is of Pan-Africanism. It's not easy being a Pan-Africanist, for because the mindset of our people is so colonized, they are going to isolate you. They are going to look at you as if you are a mad person. They are going to look at you as if you are unreasonable. But it is a cause worth pursuing because of the generation that came before us. We don't want visas. We want one currency for Africa. Because our currency can be more powerful than the pound and the dollar combined. Because London has got the biggest storage of gold, yet they don't have a single smallest mine of gold. Their economy is based on our minerals. And if we safeguard our minerals and protect them and say out of these minerals, we are producing a currency that is going to compete internationally, we stand a good chance. We need African Central Bank. We need African monetary zone. We need African military combat, because these pockets of wars that are happening in Africa are not of our own making. They are sponsored wars, so that those who continue to steal our resources can do so uninterrupted as we fight ourselves, amongst ourselves. So we need a military, a common defense system, the African High Command that will ensure the stability and security of Africa. We equally need a binding African court to deal with dictators who only exist in Africa to feed their friends and families. Those people must be prosecuted the African way, because ISIS
and has taken keen interest on there is a matter he has mentioned there. The recent visit by the king. That recent visit by the king, at one point when he was, by that recent visit of the king, at one point when he visited Nairobi National Park, and you know, this is the photo that Malema is talking about. When a red carpet was laid for him in the park, you know, it actually showed that much, and I've actually realized, I think he even didn't need it. Even himself, he was shocked. It's just like, it's a Kenyan, you know, it's a Kenyan behavior always to behave that way. But I do tend to understand that even the king did not need it. And he has mentioned that about the African agenda. He also seems not to understand why, even in Africa, we still have violence and tension. We still have areas that are experiencing stability. But we are exporting our forces to some external missions in Europe. And it was taking a straight jibe at Haiti. That speech is what I want us to look at, because it pokes some holes on our international relations policy. And really, it's a truth meter. It's a truth meter on whether William Ruto's actions fits his ambition, or rather his agenda, to be the African nice man, to be pan-African. And I want to politically interpret what Julius Malema is saying there. It comes from, and I want to put a context, he comes from South Africa. South Africa is one of the members of BRICS. And BRICS is pushing an alternative currency to that of the dollar, actually want to de-dollarize the world. And he is pushing South African agenda, while Kenya is not a member of that BRICS. And there was an attempt for Kenya to join. It didn't even work. There was a time Russia called Africa for Africa-Russia Leaders Summit. And Kenya skipped that summit, while all the other African leaders attended that summit. So despite of the president, also William Ruto, trying to portray himself as a man who is pro. So what exactly do you think is the interpretation? What's the interpretation about the Julius Malema speech? Number one, even the African, it mirrors what the African president thinks about William Ruto. It actually mirrors it. And from what I can see, it is very clear that the African heads of states, or rather the African countries, do not trust William Ruto's posturing as trying to push the African agenda. They don't trust. Because on one end, that is something that it's not questionable. You can doubt William Ruto on anything. But you cannot doubt William Ruto's perceived commitment in pursuing the African agenda. And it shows that even when they try to push something like African. Recently there was a summit in DRC and William Ruto, has been vouching for free visas to remove these trade barriers. It has not been working. That is one thing that Julius Malema also, that Julius Malema speech shows that it's not going to be something viable. Number three, that's number one. The other second interpretation I see is, I think Ruto's African network, or rather the African cloud, has reduced. There's some two instances I want to use. One, Kenya opted to intervene. I want to use three. Sudan, the Sudan war, and some side of those forces declined and said they don't want Kenya to get involved. When there was a coup in Niger, President William Ruto released a speech here, and that Kenya was even willing to mediate. Then when there was a coup in Gabon, and that coup, all the West African coups were actually, the West African coup d'etats were coups that were conducted, and they all mirrored hostility against the colonizers, the French colonizers, both Niger and Gabon. And William Ruto will then make a speech in Mozambique, if I'm not wrong, saying that they will kick out those countries out of the African Union. Actually, they remove them from the African Union if the legitimate government is not restored. So those actually utterances of crossing borders, we've seen a lot of diplomatic flaws in the country. And that is what is bringing me to that third aspect. One of the indicators that the African clout, William Ruto's African clout, has gone down is the latest diplomatic flaws. Let's use the climate change summit. Climate change summit in the country. Our neighbor here in Uganda declined to attend. We never sent even a delegation. Recently we had, and during the same one, the Pakistan PM, who was supposed to attend as the chief guest, also abstained, absconded it. Recently we had Mashujaa Day celebration. At the Mashujaa Day celebration, we had a chief guest from Namibia who skipped it. But I think that's not far from what's happening. And that is why it's a clear indication that the Kenyan clout, the William Ruto's clout in the continent is actually going down. Then the third aspect, why that is also happening is, I think, striking a balance between the East and the West. And it seems not to be clearly what we want. When we vouch, we're not clear whether we are West or we are East. We failed to give that balance. But I want to put a context as I finish this interpretation. Do you realize that the same time the King Charles was in Kenya, there was another, Chancellor from Germany, who was in Tanzania. And when he went to Tanzania, he apologized for the ills of what happened there, the Majimaji Revolution, of course. But when King Charles was in the country, King Charles did not apologize about the atrocities committed on Kenyans by the colonial powers, even though primarily he actually came for that. And he came to remind the country about those memories. Raila Odinga even saying very well that he received official invitation from King Charles himself. Of course, because that meeting with Neil Wigan, and there was a meeting between Raila Odinga and Neil Wigan on preparing for the visit of the king. And the reason being here is there have been an influx, a trend where the colonizers are coming back in the country, in the African continent, to apologize and, to try to create a rapport with the African continents. The reason being, that is happening at a time when West Africa coups have been going on. And the coup d'etats are very infectious. How about if it also happens here? How about if it also happens here? So there is a change of approach where you see now they seem to be trying to gel. They're trying to gel with Africa. And just to mention about that, do you remember Meg Whitman, who clashed with Raila Odinga during the Evolution Conference? And Raila even called her the rogue ambassador, the American ambassador. Apparently, she was in Homa Bay, and she was crowned Queen of Luo, something, for the first time, and she was welcomed by Raila Odinga's personal friend, Governor Wanga. Why? She was also in State House during the State Bouquet, when she was also in State House when the king was in the country, and was part of the team there. So UK held a very good, the visit of the king was very good in maybe creating a ties between Kenya and UK. Now, what happened here is even that rogue ambassador has been now, not rogue ambassador now, the US ambassador, he's also been trying to create a rapport. It's because there is some building hostility going on, and everyone is trying to create a space. That is why what Malema is saying in that video is actually very critical. Thank you.